Have you ever scrolled Ravelry's list of pattern designs thinking,
how do they do this?
Well, in this series, I'll lift the veil and show you exactly how a knitwear pattern is made. From sketch to grading to sample knitting to the people I employ for help to how I write the pattern, how I make the schematic drawing and how I find testers, taking the pictures, and then finally letting it all out into the world. I will show you all of it. So if you want to, come on and join me on my Knitventure. While my coffee is brewing, I thought I'd welcome you to this first episode of Knitventures. This is a series about how I design a knitwear pattern from start to finish. I will take you along for every step of this journey. The good, the bad, the ugly, everything will be shared with you guys. This is honestly the type of content that I really want to see. And therefore it's the type of content I really want to make. And I think it's a really interesting process. I think it'll be really insightful for anybody who is just curious about how a knitwear pattern is really made, what goes into it. But it's also something for people who might be thinking of designing their own first pattern, and you'll just see what steps are involved in it and what you can expect. So I'm planning on making an episode for this about every 2 weeks. And if you don't want to miss an upload, then hit the subscribe button. That's how it'll land in your inbox every time. If you've just stumbled upon this channel and you actually don't know who I am, my name is Maria. I'm the maker behind Wild Knits Glasgow, and it's a knitwear design, but also a YouTube channel. And I just love to share whatever I'm making here on YouTube. I've got reviews up, I've got some knitting podcast stuff up, knitting chats, vlogs. So it's kind of all mixed together, but always focused on knitting. And I'm also designing. So since November last year, I started designing knitwear patterns. I've got a woman's sweater out, and then a matching baby version, a hat, a little Christmas knit, and I'm currently having this little vest in the test knit phase. So loads more is coming. So I've gained a little bit of experience when it comes to knitwear design along the road. I'm definitely not an absolute expert. I've not done this for 20 years. I'm starting out as well. I would still consider myself a beginner knitwear designer, but I have learned quite a few things along the way. And like I said, I think this is a really insightful journey to share. But first of all, I just wanted to get us all on the same page in terms of terminology and what the different stages are of a knitwear design, so that we all know kind of where we're starting and where we're going. And for that, I think I'll sit down with my cup of coffee and tell you all about that. All right, let's get this coffee in. It's a decaf today. I've already had quite a bit coffee, so decaf. First up, let's talk about the different parts of a garment. This one in particular is going to be a drop shoulder design. I'll talk about it more in a minute. But for that, you have the back yoke, which is in this case going to start from the top where your neck is and going down towards the bust. Then you have the shoulder pieces. So these are going from the back, coming towards the front. You'll knit one at first, then there's another shoulder piece. Once it's at the same length, you join for the front, and then you continue length until you can join in the round, usually at the bust point. So that's the end of your yoke. So anything that's coming before the body and kind of before you join the underarms, that's called the yoke. So anything from underarm up to the top of your neck, that's the yoke. And then anything below that is called the body. And then obviously we have our sleeves, and neckline is just, where your neck sits, going around. So that's just the basic terminology. In terms of stages of a knitwear design, usually what's involved is sketching, so sketching out your idea, then finding the right yarn for it, deciding on dimensions, even if it's just a first draft of the dimensions. Then you're going on to grading, or that's at least how I do it. And then I start my sample knitting, and I will continue grading as I knit the different stages. I just found that if I grade everything from the beginning, I usually go back all the time and change numbers depending on how things look, and then I rip back my sample. So it just doesn't make sense for me to spend all that time grading the entire thing when I'll be changing things along the way still. And after the first sample is done, I go on to writing the pattern. So everything will go down on paper. And then I like to knit my second sample from the written pattern instructions. Sometimes I feel like I actually don't have enough significant changes in the second sample that I really need to make a second sample before the test knit. What I then do is knit the second sample up to the yoke, because that's where the most nitty-gritty design is involved and where the most instructions are sitting. Once I'm happy with that, then I will send the pattern to a tech editor. The tech editor makes sure that all the spelling, grammar, numbers, and everything is fine. And once we both agree on it, I'll put in her changes, and then I'll do the tester call, find my testers, and then they'll get the pattern. And then it goes into the testing phase. And the testing is basically people being really kind and generous with their time and money. And they basically all select one size and they knit that size. And the knitting community is honestly so massively generous to just say, I'll do this for you. After the test is done, I will usually send them a questionnaire. They'll give me feedback. I'll incorporate their feedback into the pattern. And then it's going into a second tech edit, usually by another person, just because of the more eyes, the better. And put in the changes from that second tech editor. And then it's usually done and ready for publishing. So those are kind of the stages involved in designing a knitwear pattern. And like I said, you'll follow me along for all of it. So that's kind of what you can expect in the next months. It's going to take months. So now let's talk about the design that I'm specifically showing in this entire series. If you've seen my stuff before, I have a very, very deep running, heavy love affair with Half Fisherman's rib at the moment. This vest is in Half Fisherman's rib. The hat that I did is in Half Fisherman's rib. And this next one's going to be in Half Fisherman's rib. At first I thought, it's definitely too much Half Fisherman's rib. But you know what? Loads of people are constantly knitting in stockinette stitch, and that's not getting old. So I can do Half Fisherman's rib. I just love it so much. I love the definition of the stitches that it gives and how increases flow in these lines. And I just love how plush and thick the fabric feels. So I've just not had enough of it yet. So I had this idea for a jumper with a drop shoulder design and a really long, thick neckband that goes down it's not going to be like a V-neck. It's going to come together at a point, but it's going to go down really far, almost waist level is what I'm imagining right now. And it'll have a really thick button band and it'll just be oversized and cozy. And the whole kind of idea is that it's going to be for those colder autumn days, Summer has just ended, you're getting a bit sad, you're missing the warmth, you're missing the light, and you just need a really cozy hug from something. That is the type of jumper that I want. Is that too much to ask? I think we're going to get there. The thing is, this pattern will be super easily adapted into a cardigan as well. So I'm actually going to call it the Wild Sea set and give instructions of how to do the jumper version, but then also how to do a cardigan. And I'll knit both, obviously. So that's the vision. Now in this episode, I will show you guys how I'm sketching out a design. And honestly, I am so bad at sketching. So I am very, very scaled back when it comes to sketching. But I'll show you how I do it anyways. And then I will show you how I selected the yarn that I wanted to use. And I will also show you how I start the grading. And then we'll begin knitting sample number 1. So yeah, let's just go. So let's talk sketching. Now that you know kind of roughly where the idea is going. The first thing that I usually like to do is do a very rough sketch. Like I said, I'm not one of those, you're not going to see a proper design sketch like you see in fashion magazines or anything like that. I'm being quite sort of just very rigid lines with it because A, I can't draw like that. And B, it helps me a lot more to visualize everything and it allows me to add the dimensions that I think will look good in each of the different areas. All right, so let's start. I will start knitting the back yoke. So that's kind of what I'll start drawing. And that'll be a bit longer than the neck of the person. So I kind of just add in the neck. There we go. So from the back neck cast on, you will then knit the shoulders. However, they're not going to be knitted straight. They're going to be knitted at an angle to add a bit more shoulder shaping. That will just drape the whole drop shoulder garment a lot nicer. So I'll just add the drape there, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So till about here, we'll do this length. So these are going to be shoulders with shaping. And then from there on, you'll have to knit straight for a while to gain the length over the yoke. And then I would like to add a little bit more shape and draw it back in so that this area here, which will be under your arms, is not going to be too fabric heavy. So I'll just pop it in a slight bit. That's kind of 1.5. And this is going to be our end of yoke. Well, end of back yoke. So we are going to start at the back neck. We're going to add shoulder increases to shape the shoulders. Then going to knit straight for a while and then decrease a little bit in order to bring it in a tiny bit for the bust. So the end of the back yoke is going to be the bust, basically. Haven't quite decided yet on the length of the yoke. But end of back yoke is definitely where people will start joining in the round. And then everything that comes under will be just the body. I have not decided yet on if I want any waist shaping or if I want any hip shaping. I don't know where the jumper will end yet. And to be honest, I would really like to go on another call with my design consultant, Jen from JP Knits Things. She's extremely knowledgeable, and every time I have these type of questions, I know that I can book an appointment with her. We have a call over Zoom, and then she just answers my specific questions to the specific designs that I have. So I send her all the grading that I have so far. I send her any sketch, anything that will help her visualize my idea. And then we talk about the specific questions that I have. So I think I'd really like to make another call with her to talk specifically about how I can accommodate the changes in larger bust sizes to make it fit them in a way that is flattering, but also to help them make adjustments for a larger bust or maybe for wider hip points, because some people, obviously, they might have a smaller bust but larger hips. And if the jumper goes over the hips, then I need to help them accommodate that and maybe make some changes. So yeah, that's the back yoke. So this part of how long I want the jumper to be is always up for debate until I knit it and try it on and just kind of decide on what I like. And then I tell people roughly where it ends and they can just adjust as they want. I'm not entirely sure yet I want a split hem for this one. I have had a split hem for this vest design and then for the maman sweater as well. I quite like it, and I think it's easy to modify maybe the front length, because with this pattern design it's a little bit trickier to get any bust darts in because they'll be quite visible. Short rows are super visible on the Half Fisherman strip design, so you could just make the front panel a little bit longer and therefore accommodate for the roundedness of the bust, which obviously brings the front up a little bit. But I don't know if I want this for that jumper. What I'm thinking would really look nice if I decrease heavily towards the end on like maybe 1 or 2 rows and then have almost like a cinched in hem, if that makes any sense. I don't know. I just don't know yet. We'll kind of have to see how we go. Anyway, that is the back of it. So then I usually write back and left and right so that I remember. So yeah, that's the back of it. Now let's look at the front. Just move this over. So the front will be different. Let me just try and draw in, and I'm so terrible at drawing, I'm so sorry. Draw in the neck roughly. And then we obviously have the back extending, like we said. This might be actually good for people who aren't good at drawing as well. We're all in this together as bad draws. 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going down 1, 2, 1, 2, roughly to here. It's actually quite useful to use dotted paper, I find. I think it'd be even more useful to use like graph paper, is that what it's called? with little teeny tiny squares, because you can just count and then draw exactly the same on each side. Sometimes I actually use a ruler, but today I decided no need for the ruler. So actually this is 2 here, so we're going to make it 2 here, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 down and roughly about here. So that's the shoulder shaping. Obviously, because your shoulders are rounded, so they have to be quite a long bit of knitting straight in order to come up to this point. Yep, you can see it on this vest, how the line droops to the side. That's the shoulder shaping, and then you have to knit straight for quite a while in order to bring it around the shoulders to this bit here, and then you start your front yoke. So all of that I kind of have to decide and do a little bit of maths on to see how I want this to fall and shape. But the idea is that the front has, how do I sketch this out best? Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with something like this. Maybe a more rounded neck. But then this opening here will be quite wide because I want that thick button band. So the button band will go down quite far as well. I really want it to be oversized. And now this is the neckband. And I'm for now imagining maybe a rib. So we're gonna just lightly shape that in. But again, this is probably going to change if I'm gonna try that on a little swatch and then see how I like the Half Fisherman's rib together with that rib. Maybe a 1x1, maybe a 2x2 rib. If I don't like it, I'll go back to my trusty old double knitting. So that's kind of the neckband. And then, because this is a drop shoulder and we're going to go in, so we're knitting straight here for a while. What did I say? 1, 2, 3, 4? No, about 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Oops. This is actually a good pen for sketching if you don't like using pencil. This is from Pilot. It's a Frixion ball pen, but you can erase it, which I find quite useful. And then we're going in over 1 and 2, going in like that. So that's how the shoulders are going to be shaped. And then it's going to go, like I said, straight down, or I don't know. This is obviously now not the same dimensions. I imagine this to maybe be waist. I don't know. This is obviously, it's like way too big. Actually, let's just fix this. Just talking about how great this pen is at fixing things. So let's just, okay. So this I imagine to be at waist for now. But again, I'll just see how that knits up and how I like it at that stage. Then not entirely sure yet how long I want the jumper to be. We're just going to end it here. Okay, arms and then sleeves, no idea yet. I will maybe taper them, maybe leave them fairly long, or maybe do a type of balloon sleeve. So with that, I mean, I will decrease very minimally just to give it ever so slightly of a hint of shaping, and then decrease massively towards the cuff, because then it'll kind of have that balloon sleeve effect. And I think that might look really good with the cinched in part at the hip that I was talking about. So maybe that's the vision I'll go for, but I'm not entirely sure. So that is kind of my rough sketch here. So now I need to remember that this is the left and this is the right, because obviously we're looking at the face here. Yeah, I think that's my rough sketch. Now, where I usually go from here is I decide on dimensions, because I personally like to have the dimensions, at least for the yoke, set out before I start, because I want to grade everything. That is actually a tip that Jen gave me, because I was really struggling the last time of making everything fit and look good over the different sizes. She says, just start grading and then you'll see how well you're able to translate everything into the different sizes. And it just also helps me to do a better job from the start. So I had a bit of issues deciding on the actual dimensions for this one. Actually, story time. I have actually knitted this one before I started this design. I I should have said that somewhere earlier. I have started this design already last year in August. And I've gotten up to a point and I just wasn't happy with it. So I decided to shelve it. I got the idea for the hat, and that was time sensitive because a hat you'll just wear in winter. So I actually just decided to lay it to rest and pick it up again later. And when I started it, I really had trouble imagining the different dimensions on my body, especially because I'm not usually knitting drop shoulders. And drop shoulder designs need a lot of positive ease in order to fit well. And that kind of scared me a little bit. So I had a call with Jen, and she suggested, how about you just buy a super cheap piece of fabric, draw out your dimensions, stitch it together, and then you kind of see what it would look like on your body with your shape, and you can tweak before you invest all the time in knitting it. And that is actually what I did. And that was an extremely useful piece of advice because I actually saw some areas that I wanted to tweak that I wasn't quite happy with, but it also gave me confidence in some of the other dimensions that I've chosen because I really thought they looked good on me. So I went and did that last year in August, and I still have those measurements and I still have some of the numbers from the grading that I did back then. But grading will be something that I'll discuss in the next video because I've just started cutting this video and I noticed it's already quite long and I don't want to overwhelm everybody with loads of information. I feel like there's already a lot packed into it. So I think we'll leave the grading for the next episode. But what I still want to talk about is the yarn choice. So now that I have my sketch and now that I know roughly my dimensions that I want to go for in my first sample, I want to look at yarns. And usually the way I do it is I kind of already have an idea in mind of the fabric that I want to create. The yarn choice is really down to the fabric that you imagine your garment to have for me. And also kind of when I want to wear it, the kind of vision I have for it in terms of how you want to wear it, how it's going to be living on you. And actually, like I said, I did knit this before. And that first time I thought I would use a light gray DK weight yarn. It was a Drops Merino Extra Fine, I think, which is a super wash. And I bought a whole bunch of this yarn thinking it would be a completely different color. And I got really disappointed when it came and it was this light gray. It was supposed to be a really nice light beige, almost like my shirt today. And I got really frustrated when it was a gray and I have this huge sweater quantity of it. But I thought it might work for this project. So I started knitting with that, like I said, back in August last year, but fell out of love with it. And yeah, I just don't like the color anymore, but I'm also not too sure I really want this to be a DK weight project. I think because I want this big plush coziness that hugs you on cold autumn days, I want it to be a little bit thicker and I want to add more hair. I just love how plush that feels. So I completely ripped back that first sample and I'm going to start again with a different yarn. I'm going to use an Aran weight this time. And I will use my all-time favorite Aran weight, which is Drops Nepal. It's made up of alpaca and wool. I forgot the constitutions of each. And then I'm going to hold it together with one of their Kid Silk mohairs in a really nice lush green tone. I've knitted the Sunday sweater before in this green and I just love it. And it's a mix as well, so it's not too hard to mix different dye lots. There's some continuity within the dye lots because it's a mix, I think. The good thing is I already had quite a lot of that yarn in my stash for a project that I then didn't go on and do. So kind of reusing what I have, which is nice. But yeah, I just love the type of feel that this wool gives, and I like that it's an Aran weight, so I can knit it on larger needles. In terms of needles, again, it depends on the fabric that I want to create. I talked a little bit about this actually in my summer yarn video. The needles and the yarn weight that you're using, that combination creates the density of your fabric, and if you want it to be a really dense fabric, you need to use a thick yarn with smaller needles. And if you want to create a more airy open weave, then you need to use a thinner yarn with larger needles. With this one, I really kind of want to create a bit more of a dense fabric. I don't want anything super light and open. I know Half Fisherman's rib, because of the way that it's created, is a little bit forgiving and you don't see openness all that easily, but I do want it to feel quite warm and cozy. So I swatched with first 5mm needles, but then also 6mm needles, because I knew I was going to go around that area. And I decided after blocking, I decided to go with the 5mm needles, just because it's that little bit more dense and a little bit more tight. And I think it'll just look a little bit better, especially also considering that it will not drag, but there will be weight on the shoulder pieces because of the entire body and the sleeves hanging on it. And because there's so much yarn used in Half Fisherman's rib and it's heavier yarn, I think that will eventually just kind of drag a little bit on the shoulders and open up the weave a little bit more. And I think with a 6mm that would just be a touch too much. So I decided to go with the 5mm. But it's really down to the type of fabric I imagine the garment to have, and then just experience and knowing that these needles will give me that type of fabric with this yarn and so on. But, you know, just swatch away. That's what I usually always do. And that in turn then helps you get your gauge measurements and so on. So it's not lost. And I absolutely unravel unused gauge swatches, or I label them. And then I just staple the label onto a little yarn tail. And then I know which needles I used, what yarn I used, what stitch pattern it is. So that if I ever want to go back and maybe design something else with that yarn in that same stitch pattern, then I already have a swatch for a 6mm or 5mm needle or whatever it is. The other little trick and tip that I would have if you are wanting to go down the design route is to maybe buy a few single skeins of yarn that you like. You don't always have to go in and buy a sweater quantity if you're really not too sure whether the yarn will work out and create the fabric that you're imagining. I very often just buy single skeins of yarn that I find interesting or that I would like to use, that I would like to just try out, and then see how it works up, and if it is the way I imagined it, how it maybe knits together with a different strand, and just kind of experiment with it. It means I can try loads of things, but I didn't have to commit to having a whole garment quantity of it in my stash that's just going to sit there if it turns out my idea didn't work. So that's definitely something I found quite useful to do over the last few months. Okay, so in the next video, I will actually start the grading. So I'll talk you through my process bit by bit. And I think the next videos are going to be having a bit more of a slower pace than this one. I feel like there was quite a lot packed into it, but there's kind of a few steps to the start of this. And I think the next ones will be a lot slower in pace. I will start the back yoke in the next video, so I'll show you how I grade that and I'll show you how it knits up. Then there'll just be kind of vloggy bits. I kind of hope this will also be a little bit more of a vlog style rather than these sit down videos, but we'll kind of see. We'll see where the journey takes us. Also just want to set expectations, you know, who knows where this is going to end up. Maybe I'm going to hit a wall and I just don't know how to continue and this will never make it out. Maybe it'll be a super successful knitwear pattern and this is a beautiful history to have documented, but we just don't know. This is real time as it happens. But like I said in the beginning of the video, I hope you'll find this interesting. I hope you'll learn some tips and tricks along the way. I just also hope it's entertaining. So that's the first episode of Knitventures. I hope you're gonna subscribe in order to get the next one, which hopefully will be up in 2 weeks' time. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the boxes down below. And otherwise, I will see you again with a new video that's not Knitventures next week. Bye!